Hello and welcome to another episode of Fly to Freedom. Today I'm joined by someone whose work and story I deeply admire, Dr. Rachel Evans. Rachel is a chartered psychologist, hypnotherapist and podcast host who blends professional expertise with her own lived experience of bulimia recovery. She supports one-to-one clients who feel trapped in a cycle of food obsession, body hatred and extreme behaviours like purging and over-exercising. Rachel is known for her compassionate, trauma-informed and individualised approach to healing, an approach that centres the person, not the label. She's been featured in Psychology's magazine and spoken on BBC Radio and delivered powerful talks at conferences and wellness festivals across the UK. Her mission is to challenge diet culture, reduce shame and offer evidence-based insights that actually lead to freedom. So today we're going to be going deep into a topic that's often really hidden in the shadows, and that's purging behaviours, whether that's vomiting, laxatives, or compulsive exercise. We're going to look at what those behaviours really mean and why they're so hard to stop, and what healing from them looks like. Rachel, welcome to the episode.
Yeah, thank you so much. You're so calming. I'm like, oh, I think I came with an excitable energy today, so we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
It's funny, lots of people say my voice is quite calming, and I get quite a lot of comments on it. But throughout my life and through the eating disorder and stuff, I barely spoke because I hated my voice and I didn't think I had anything worth saying that people would want to listen to. So I always find it really ironic that I get comments on my voice now when it was something that I silenced for most of my life.
Yeah, interesting. Cool.
So, Rachel, can you start by sharing a little bit about your journey through bulimia and what you brought you into the work you do now?
Yeah, I'll try and keep it short because I guess most people's experience with an eating disorder, it didn't happen overnight and it didn't, resolve itself overnight. It took years. And just to say, I do use the label bulimia, but as you said in the introduction, I don't really like to give labels. I just say it because it's kind of easier than giving a whole explanation in the introduction. But I think for me, it started with wanting to be healthier, maybe going on a diet. I think I grew up, my parents went on diets, but not like every week. There were, a couple of times when they would go on a diet or go to the gym more. I think just typical comments from my grandparents, or not so much my parents, more my grandparents' generation, maybe about people's weight and things. And I kind of got this impression that maybe I was, heavier than I should be or fatter than I should be. I think my body was pretty normal, inverted commas. Maybe I had some puppy fat, but I think I, just got this idea growing up that, maybe you need to be thin. And I also got this idea that you need to be thin in order for people to like you in a romantic sense. And for me, that would be for boys to like me. I went to an all-girls school, so wasn't really an issue about boys because there weren't really any boys there, and I did sports clubs and stuff outside, but I was really busy. I wasn't really interested in a romantic relationship. I only realized after all this had happened, I actually put a lot of my self-worth on getting good grades. I was quite, like, I would say, perfectionist. As on one hand, I don't like to give a label, but if we were to give it a label, that was kind of how I was. So I didn't have an issue with food as such that I recognised as disordered eating or an eating disorder until I was finishing my undergraduate degree. There had been times in that where I had dieted for an event, which I think is kind of normal, inverted commas, when people see the video, in a sense that I think people do that, don't they? They say, oh, I've got this for one of mine was like a sports ball. And so I was like, oh, I want to look good in my dress. And to me, looking good in my dress meant dieting, even though arguably I probably didn't even lose that much weight. But I don't know, somehow for me, the intention of doing it would then make me feel better. I do really remember one comment because I was doing a lot of sports and a lot of exercise, and I did lose some weight because of that. I think that was in my first year. I wasn't restricting, but I was being careful about what I ate. Maybe I was still eating a quantity of food that supported my body, but because of the extra sports, I lost some weight. And I really remember I shared a bathroom with someone that in my halls, and her commenting about my weight and saying like it was a good thing. So I feel like, you know, it's these little comments that people make that kind of reinforce, oh, that's going to be a good thing. And then when I did a year abroad because I didn't know what to do after I finished my undergraduate degree, I was quite worried, you know, about like what job shall I get? Do I have experience for it? And then I came back from that, and I think that's when I started getting more strict with food, or more of my attention started to be on food. So more of my attention would be like, at the time there was Instagram and stuff, but I was using it. That was like 2012. I was using it more for like seeing my friends and stuff, and like posting photos and things like that, not really looking for like influencers. I don't think it was such a big thing then. So I'd be looking in magazines of like what I ate in a day type things, or, you know, I would go on the Women's Health website and, you know, look at all their sort of exercise programs and things. So I think I was just picking up all these comments and ideas about, oh, this is a bad food, or this is a good food, or this food is gonna do this to you. I don't really want to give the specific examples, but I hope you know what I'm what I'm getting
That's
at.
everywhere, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think a lot of them are quite conflicting, but I didn't realise that. And then I started masters in health psychology. Actually, this is not the short version. This is a really long version. But I started a masters in health psychology, and I stopped doing sports at that time. And I realised actually I also got a lot of my self-worth from sports. A lot of my friends were there. I actually think I have had a lot of grief around stopping that, but I didn't realise at the time, because that had been a big part of my life for like 10 years, that then I just didn't have that anymore. So I kind of turned my attention to, okay, I feel like my dad had made some comments somewhere about like, oh, you can't eat like you do if you stop doing all this sports, something around
Yeah.
them lines. So I thought, right, well, I still have to keep exercising. I also thought if I want to go into health promotion, I need to look a certain way. And to me, that certain way was, I think at that point, I had looked at more influencers online. I was following
Mm-hmm.
someone in Australia who, maybe from this description, people will know who I'm talking about if they also followed her. She had like a bikini body guide. So I downloaded this guide. I was looking at her with her tan and her abs and thinking, okay, if I want, you know, to help people feel healthier and be healthier through, you know, psychology and health promotion and things, that's how I need to look, which is pretty unrealistic since we live in the UK and we're probably not going to get a tan unless we self tan, or like, you know, go to a tanning bed or something. But that was my picture of health, which now I realize is quite a narrow picture of health.
Mm-hmm.
And for some people, for me, trying to attain that physique was actually an unhealthy thing to do in terms of my behaviors and then what I was eating and kind of where it ended up. But at the time, that was what I thought. And I think when I finished, I was kind of getting stressed. Not kind of. I was getting stressed towards the end of my masters. Like, oh, what do I do with my life? I feel like I need a plan, and I think I was comparing myself to, you know, sometimes people are like, right, I want to be a doctor, or I want to be a surgeon. Right, here's my career path to get there. Whereas I feel like in psychology, I don't know if anyone listening who has done a psychology undergrad, you think, well, if you think I want to be a psychologist, but then there's lots of different kinds of psychologists, and then you feel like you need your work experience to be that kind of psychologist, and I didn't have the right work experience and things. And then they make it seem really scary to get on clinical, like, oh, there's a limited amount of places, like it's really tough. And so I thought, well, I'm not even going to try then. But actually, maybe I could have tried to do it at that point. But just, and also then they're like, oh, you can actually use these skills for lots of things like marketing and this and that, all of these things. And so I think I was quite lost, but no one was helping me with that. It was more like, well, no, now you need to apply for a job. Now you need to know what to do and have ideas, which was really difficult for me. So why I'm explaining all these different things is it's not just the food and the weight that was a factor to me. It was all these other life things that were going on that was then making me increase more control about food, or making me feel like I need to exercise more, and then feeling anxious and stressed if I missed exercise. So it was kind of creeping up. Then I had as I was telling you earlier, I wasn't really that interested in boys or men. I feel like they were kind of boys at that age, aren't they? Sometimes quite more immature. You know, I'd had a few things happening, a few at university, but like wasn't my priority. And then when I was finishing my masters, I thought I was dating someone. He did not think that we were dating. Maybe we could have had a better conversation around that. But I think that hit me really hard, because like the things that we had in common were like going to the gym and working out, and like I thought we were dating because I would go to his house and watch The Apprentice and like hang out and do stuff. So to me, that was like we're dating, but we had an experience. He invited me over to his house for a barbecue. Then he tried to uninvite me. His friends were going to this barbecue, but I was like, oh no, I'll still come. Like, I've made this cake to take. So maybe I was a bit naive, probably. And then he basically ignored me the whole time, and we went out and he was talking to other girls, and like his friends were really apologizing for his behavior, and I was like really upset because I thought, oh, this person likes me. He'd made some comments about my body. And so it kind of hit me quite hard. I
Mhm.
maybe there were signs that I was missing at the time. I'm, you know, not taking any responsibility for how things played out, but also it just felt like, oh, I thought you liked me, but now actually you don't. And then I think I was very influenced by shows like, you've seen, you probably probably haven't, but like Khloe Kardashian had the show Revenge Body.
Okay,
And
I've
I
heard of
feel
it.
like picking up as well, maybe from like teen movies about like people having a glow up is the term we might use today. I was like, right, now I need to look so physically amazing that he is like, oh, why did I do that to her?
Yeah.
When actually now taking a step back, having some time between it, I'm like, but if he didn't like me as a person, like there's lots of other good qualities about me rather than just my body, but at the time that was what I was focusing on. And also just stuff like this is about this guy, but like then when we couldn't break up because we weren't dating, but when we had a conversation after this night out, he's like, oh, I didn't even like sushi. And I was like, but why would you then go on a date with me to somewhere, well, I thought it was a date, probably was, to get sushi and make sushi at your house as an activity if you didn't like it? It just seemed very odd. So I feel like that was like
It
difficult for
sounds
me
very confusing.
at the
Yeah.
time because I didn't have much experience in that area
Yeah.
as
Well,
well.
you have to go through these things to learn, don't you?
Yes, and then I did get another boyfriend after that, um, quite soon after, and then I got a job abroad in Singapore, and I think things were getting to be what we might label like a disordered relationship with food at that point. Like I cut a lot of things out, and I feel like before when I'd been on a diet, it was like I'm on a diet for a set amount of time, and then I'll come off that diet. But also a lot of times with it, I mean, there was one time I got quite into calorie counting and making lists and stuff, but then I came out of it again within
Hmm.
not a long time period, maybe like 2 months after the event was done. I was like, right, I'm going to start eating those foods again. Whereas this time now, I would get very stressed out if I was going to eat it. I would be planning what I was eating in the whole week. I was living at home with my parents for my master's. Because it was only in the next town and I was only there 2 days a week, and I was like, well, I want to save some money. So I think I was quite isolated from that. But my original point was going to be like, my mum was cooking for me. I think it was getting a bit stressful for her to know, like, well, you don't want to eat these things that we used to eat as a family. I think they were getting quite concerned about me because I think I was probably exercising twice a day at that point, definitely once a day, like high intensity type stuff. And like I was saying, I would get a bit snappy if I couldn't do it. Like I did not recognize that this at all was an issue. I was like, I want to be healthy. I was thinking, well, my parents aren't being healthy. I don't, want their opinion on this topic because they eat X, Y, and Z foods I now think are not good foods. I think it was the rise of clean eating. I don't even
Hmm.
think it very much was. And so the people that I were looking at were saying like, oh, eat your chia seeds, eat, have your kale smoothie. And I would have those things even though I didn't really like them and they weren't satisfying to me. I was trying to convince myself that I liked these foods. And then I was really, I don't even know now where I saw it or how I saw it. Maybe it was on Instagram. I don't know. It probably was on Instagram. Like eating raw or raw till
Ah,
four, like sort of that side of things and being vegan. And it's like, well, I can't do that at home because my parents wouldn't let me. Was 20, was it 23 at the time? I think it was 23 at the time, but still, if you're living with your parents, I feel like they've got some sway over
yes,
over these things.
yeah,
And so I'd really just counting down. So I got the job in the September, and then my parents had a factory, and I was working at their factory until September because what other job should I
yeah.
get? So I was kind of just working for them and living with them, which was a thing in itself. Um, but yeah, so I was counting down until like, right, then I can do this raw food diet and everything will be amazing and I'll have this amazing body. But actually what happened was then I tried to do this. Then there were foods that I liked that weren't raw, for example, like yogurt or something. Then I would get really stressed out about eating that. I would got to the point when I would be standing in shops for 10 minutes debating, should I have this or should I have that, which I'm not saying to people don't look at labels if you want to look at labels and things, but it was the mental anguish and the amount
Yeah.
of time that I was spending doing these
The
things.
wants and the shoulds and things.
Yeah, or if I would go out to a restaurant, I would, I keep using the word stress, but it did feel like stressed out, anxious about like what's going to be on this menu, what am I going to, have. So it was getting more restrictive at that point in terms of health. I did lose some weight as a result of that. I know everyone's experience of having an eating disorder or disordered eating and things is not that they would lose weight, but I did in this time period. I think I just got so wrapped up in it because I had that time. I made new friends there, but I was stressed to get in food situations. I suppose we're meant to be talking about purging, aren't we? But like this is all the precursor to like
Yeah,
I was
no, that's so
purging
good.
at that time. Had a couple of times when I would say I had a binge, but not very much, and they were always preceded by me going out and eating something that I felt like I shouldn't have done or too much, and then I would just go home and eat like quite a lot of quantity of food and things that were I had in the house but maybe felt off limits. And it's interesting because I've talked to some of the people I worked with since actually. One of them came to do the masters that I'd done before I left, which was really nice. So we stayed more friendly, and their impression was like Rachel is the healthy one. Rachel walks to work, which it was actually a lot of people wouldn't walk to work in Singapore because you would just get really sweaty. So I know someone who worked in an office that was literally like a 10-minute walk away, but they wouldn't walk because their suit would be like dripping in sweat. So yeah, Rachel like walks to work. She always brings her own lunch because the culture was more to have lunch there, whereas I would always bring my salad. So it looks like, oh, she's really healthy. Rachel will work out. Maybe I looked healthy. I'm not sure, but like to me, there was a lot going on under that. But that was their perception. And fast forwarding in the story, I think it was really difficult. For part of the reason it was difficult for me to change what I ate was because I had this identity now and this persona.
Yeah.
How can I just decide not to do that anymore? Um,
Yeah. I'm guessing that persona felt quite validating as well, felt like you were doing a good thing and being a good person almost from your behaviors. So, yeah, it's tough to let that go.
yeah,
And even to acknowledge that it might look like that on the outside, but actually it's not healthy.
yeah. So I had a moment when my dad came out to visit me. My dad, part of his factory, he did business with China, factory in China. So he was going to see them. So he kind of stopped off at Singapore on the way to see me, and he was like, "Oh, like you don't look." I don't know how to phrase this now, but like he was quite shocked that I'd lost some weight in quite a short amount of time, and he was like, "I'm going to cancel the family holiday to come and see you, which was going to be in a few months away, unless you like start eating more." Because, like I say, he'd been concerned before I left, but not really concerned enough to make more than a couple of comments.
Mhm.
Then he hadn't seen me because I was in a different country, and I recognised at the time, okay, this is a problem, and I did like look for support, and also just to say, I in my undergraduate degree had done a module that included information about eating disorders, and actually for that exam, and I wrote a question about eating disorders and treatment. I got an award for that exam. So it's like intellectually I could see these things, but when it was happening to me, I did not think this could be classified as an eating disorder. Which actually, side note, complicated issue. It wasn't because I wasn't low enough weight or I wasn't doing these other behaviors. But looking at it now, to me, it very much felt like actually this is,
Yes.
an eating disorder that I was going through, but it wasn't almost
It
validated
didn't
by anyone
tick
else.
the boxes.
Yeah. So I did go to the thing that I found there was like a hospital who had an inpatient treatment, but also you could just go to one of their support meetings without like
Okay.
signing up to anything. You could kind of just turn up and go to it. So I went to that, and people they were really nice actually. They were like really validating about, oh, I can see why you're like worried about when your family come over and that you might be going to a hotel with a buffet and there's a lot of food there, and that felt overwhelming to me. Or I'm not sure if you ever felt in that space of like you want to eat the food but you're not going to let yourself eat it, but
A
it's
lot.
there,
Yeah.
and like, oh, why am I even in this situation that I don't want to be in? And also the pressure of like, oh, but I need to pretend that I'm okay so my parents don't get upset about it, or even that fear of gaining weight, in the sense of it's based in some stuff, but it almost has got to the point of being an irrational fear that the
Hmm.
worst things ever are going to happen if I put on weight. But also I didn't go back after that, because I went way back into denial that there was a problem. Like, I bought other food and I knew how many calories it was, and I knew what it was, but I found it so hard to eat that because it wasn't in my rules. It's like part of me thought, well, I should be doing these things, like should, because my parents say or other people do, but I
Yeah.
just couldn't. And yeah, it just, that was kind of tricky. Or like I remember on my birthday, people bought me a birthday cake at work, and I was thinking, oh God, now I've got to eat this cake, like, and pretend it's okay, but I really don't feel okay about it. I'm sorry if I use a specific example and that's upsetting. For people, I just mean more the situations that were a
Yeah.
problem. And I actually ended up ending that contract early because the project wasn't really getting anywhere. I feel like it was a little bit missold on the job description what I was going to be doing. But I was just so homesick. I'm not sure if you experienced when you were not eating enough. I just found it really difficult to control my emotions, or like they felt more heightened about things.
Ah, see, I was the opposite, and I was like emotionless, completely numb.
Yeah, interesting. So for me, it was, no, I definitely felt things, or like I just remember crying in a meeting with my supervisor, and I think he was a bit like, oh gosh, like what is going on here? I don't know how to handle this. Just like, oh, we're not getting these participants. And unfortunately, his response was like a nervous laugh, which didn't really help me in that
Yeah.
situation. So I was like, you know what? I think I've just got to go home. Um, I think because then I got home and I was like, oh, did you have an amazing time? Because you would think, like, living in a different country, you're
Yeah.
going to have a great time. But actually, I had a rubbish. Well, I had nice moments and I did nice things. I'm not saying I didn't, but overall, had a rubbish time because I was so obsessed with food and exercising, and then the knock-on impacts that had, that maybe I could have made more friends because I felt quite lonely, but I didn't, because lots of events revolve around food or things are quite expensive there. And then I came back, ended up working for my parents again because I didn't get a job straight away. And then I was in that situation where, like, you're looking for a job, but looking for a job feels like a full-time job, because I wanted something more specific in psychology rather than
Hmm.
like get a job in a cafe. I was like, well, I'd rather
Yeah.
wait and get something specific. But then they could see how unhappy I was with that, which is obviously difficult for them. And I'm spending a lot of time with them at work and at home. So I feel like they were really on my case. And so I did go and see a psychologist, well, a therapist. I'm not actually quite sure what her title was because I wasn't paying so much attention at the time. I think she really helped me, like, with life direction. And that's when I applied to do a PhD. I really only agreed to go because I wanted to complain about my parents. I'm thinking before or after. I I think I tried to get help with the NHS, but they didn't recognise that I had an eating disorder. I mean, like I say, labels, whether I did or didn't, is debatable, but my experience was
Yeah.
that I feel like I did. But I didn't know that at the time. And obviously it's really tricky. I feel like, I'm sorry, so sorry, this isn't the point of the conversation. You might have to change the
No, it's all
title.
good. It's all good.
But like, it's really difficult as the client, though, or what, patient, or whatever you would want to call them, to sit there and be like, oh, actually, yeah, I know I'm not eating enough. Like, to me, I was focusing on, like, my periods aren't, I haven't got periods anymore, my hair's falling out, I'm cold all the time, and I get really anxious in these situations. And the doctors didn't really ask me questions that would point to, like, what's your relationship with food, because my weight was at the bottom end of the healthy range. So they were probably like, oh, okay, that's fine, she's healthy, we'll do some blood tests and things. So when I was talking about the anxiety, they're like, okay, we'll give you CBT for anxiety. But then I did have one, I had an assessment with someone who was really nice. And then the person that I got assigned to, I just feel like we didn't really click. And then I was lucky enough that my parents said that they would support me if I had private therapy. So to find someone for that, who I found someone. And I think it really did help there when I then trained, to work with clients. Sometimes I was like, oh, that's what she was doing to me when she was asking me like certain questions about food and almost helping me, challenge those thoughts. And she wasn't saying how true is it, but or like where did that information come from? But I think I was slowly unpicking. Oh, actually, all these rules that I have about food aren't helping me. Um, Unfortunately, maybe not unfortunately, I don't know if that's what I felt unfortunate at the time because I felt horrible at the time. Then I started binge eating. Do you want to call it binge eating? Do you want to call it extreme hunger? I don't think it really matters, but my experience was that I would wake up in the middle of the night and go to the kitchen and just feel absolutely compelled to eat everything. It started out as me waking up one night, then going to eat something that I tried to eat before bed, but then didn't let myself. And then I was just so hungry when I woke up that I went to eat it. And I don't know if anyone else listening has had this moment or if you've had this moment. I was in the kitchen, it was nighttime, it had some kind of spotlights, and I ate this food. And I just describe it as like, it just felt like angels were singing. I was like, oh, this food, like, this is so nice. It wasn't even anything like spectacular. But I think my body was just like, thank you for this food.
I
And
think,
something about it felt safe as well because it was winter and so it was dark outside, or I would shut the curtains, a bit paranoid that people were going to see me, not that anyone would like care. So it kind of felt safe for me in that
yeah.
moment to have that food. But then that led to actually then that amount of food was increasing. Um, I don't know if I would say I felt like out of control at that point. I felt like I can't stop myself from going to the kitchen and have a conversation with myself. I feel like compelled to go. But like in
Mm-hmm.
terms of what I was eating, I don't think it felt like some of my later binges in terms of like I'm doing this really fast. I'm really anxious. It was me eating these different foods, but feeling like I can't not eat them. Um, but then tricky in that I would eat stuff that I knew my mum wanted to eat herself, but I would feel like, oh, I just have to eat this food because when I wake up in the morning, there's no way I'm going to let myself have that. And then I would keep trying different diets and different rules. Like I'll be like, okay, let me do Whole30 this week because that says it's going to fix your relationship with food. Or like, oh, let me do this other diet, which would then say the Whole30 is like, oh, you're allowed to eat salmon, but don't eat peas. And so I'd be
So
like,
you would
but then I would
you would
swap to
try,
a different one.
sounds like you were trying to heal your relationship with food, but by following different diets.
Yes, because they were being sold as this will give you a reset or this will stop you feeling out of
Yeah.
control about food. So it was very much a diet. But the way I was seeing it is this is going to be the magic fix for everything.
Mm-hmm.
Because like I said, I was also experiencing health issues, which I think were a result of me not eating enough, like digestion
Yeah.
issues and things. So then the purging, which we were originally going to talk about, and now it's been half an hour. um, just one thing to say. So I think the therapist has done additional training since, but I don't think she really understood. I feel like I can't stop eating this food. I feel like she was like, oh, could you do some yoga if you wake up in the middle of the night? No, absolutely not. I cannot do some yoga when I wake up in the middle of the night. I have to go and eat all this food. So I don't think she quite got that. She did really help me in other things, like I say, life direction and other stuff. Side note quickly before we get to the purging, I ended up splitting up with my boyfriend, who I'd had all the same boyfriend all the time that I was abroad. Like he came and saw me. And then when we got back, we were together because we were always falling out because I think I was just always hangry. Like there was a
Mm-hmm.
lot of stuff that we couldn't do or I didn't want to do because it involved food. Sometimes he kind of suppose he didn't know the right thing to say. If we went out, he would be really anxious for me. So we split up. And then I can't remember what I said to her in the session, but my impression of what she said was like, oh, you should go and talk to him, which maybe she didn't even say that, but that's what I got from it. I went to talk to him. I just drove straight to his house after the session. It was an in-person session. I drove to his house. He basically like shut the door on me. And so I was like, oh, she gives me bad advice. I'm never going back. So I just ghosted her, which I do not agree with. I think as a therapist, I think it's helpful for people to have an ending, or I could have had a conversation with her around what was it that I thought she'd said and what did she actually say and what is this situation. But anyway, so that. I was like, nope. He shut the
But you
door
were
on my
still in
face.
a survival state, weren't you? You were still in a state of high anxiety. So everything felt big and scary at that time, I guess.
Yeah, probably. I mean, because, and then my body was changing as a result of what I was eating. I mean, in terms of weight, but also like if woken up and eaten quite a lot in the middle of the night, I was quite bloated. So then the purging came in as a way, I think, well, if I ate stuff that weren't according to my food rules, it it for me was also very much about the quantities as
Hmm.
well as the types of food, but it was the types of food too. Then I was like, right, well, I'll just throw it up to get rid of it. Like, surely that's the answer. Then it won't be in my body causing a problem because someone's told me this. It's really hard to do it without giving a specific example. But like this food group, will do these things to your body that you don't want to happen. So I thought, right, I'll get it out of my body. What I didn't
Yeah.
realize is it's not all coming out. Actually, when people are sick, often people experience endorphins from that. So then for me, as things went along, it actually felt like I felt almost addicted to the being sick. And that's the thing that then got increasing in frequency till fast forward, like, when was that? Several years. I was actually at that point then binging to make myself sick. And so it actually, even that changed a lot for me, which maybe we can get there in a minute. But in the beginning, the intention was I want to get rid of that
Hmm.
food. I'm not thinking about the other health impacts that it's going to have on my body, the most important thing now. And I'm trying to think. I don't know if that happened when I was working with the therapist. I don't think that I talked to her about it if it was happening at the time. I really can't remember. It was over 10 years ago, so I'm not quite sure. But I suppose even in that, I'm not sure if you ever felt the same way of like, sometimes I don't want to tell them that because then they might take that away from me, and that feels like my coping at the minute.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, so I did have some really good friends, two really good friends at that time who were very supportive, and like we would go swimming and stuff, which felt like a gentle kind of activity. We would just, talk about life and all the things that were going on. And then I started my PhD. So I had in my head, I had a massive turnaround, and because a lot of things had changed, I had got a lot more flexible with food. I was eating more. Actually, splitting up with my boyfriend was a good thing in that I think he was, without meaning to, like constraining me. Like he would think I would act a certain way. So he would be adding anxiety to a situation.
Yeah.
And then I would pick up on that anxiety and it would be like a feedback loop. So I feel like that break was really important. And I also think there's the piece that I was saying before, right in the beginning, about I think I had this idea I had to look a certain way for other
Hmm.
people, or like for people to find me romantically attractive. And so I think not having him in the picture, kind of, I could let go of that a bit at that
Yeah.
time as well. So I feel like I did have, I don't know what word you want to call it then, but quite a lot of healing over a couple of months of like actually getting more freedom around food. However, it's strange because in my head there's like different conflicting things. There's that piece that I'm like, I did get a lot more freedom, but there's also a piece that I remember my sister bought me some food for my birthday, like healthy protein bars. And I still remember I was stressed about them and how much I was going to eat and when I was going to eat it. And, there was still a lot of mental talk, self-talk around that. So I wasn't okay, but in my head, even when I think back at the time, if I think about it without being critical, I'm like, oh, I was a lot better then, which I
Hmm.
was, but I also wasn't. So I started my PhD at that point. Because I was feeling a lot better, I thought I would start a health food blog. I suppose, I mean, actually, I thought I was a lot better in the sense that because I was eating more in the day, I was still waking up in the night sometimes to binge, but it wasn't every night. And the quantity of food was not as much. So I suppose I was gauging it on that sense as well, like this is reduced. And then
Yeah.
that got to be more, when it did happen, it was if I was really stressed or there was something else going on in the mix, not just, well, not maybe just isn't the right word, not only the biggest part is I feel like my body needs this food. It got to be related to other things.
So it became a coping mechanism as well.
Yeah, without me realizing that's what it is.
Hmm.
So the binging was very much only at night to begin with. When I started my PhD, which was about the psychology of eating, it was about factors like habits and self-control, and looking at intentions and motivations, and looking at theory, and how can we test that theory? How do we measure these different variables? So it actually got to be more like theoretical and stuff rather than applied, which I think was my intention. But anyway, when I started that, I started an health food Instagram account, because I still think I wanted to help other people be healthy, and my definition of healthy, I think, was still like, don't eat too much sugar and that stereotypical thing that we might, see on the NHS
Yeah, so the
website.
intentions were good, but you didn't fully take into account that you were still in a disordered relationship with food.
Yes, so things like, I have talked about this on my Instagram recently. If I will use a specific food, by the way, so people fast forward a couple of minutes if you don't want a specific food, but things like peanut butter.
Mm-hmm.
I was so conflicted about that because I was like, well, some people say it's got healthy fats and that's okay, but some people say, is that too much fat? And oh, I could have the one with no salt, but if this one's got salt. I remember when I was still going out with my boyfriend, I bought the peanut butter that I wanted, which was the 100% peanuts one, and I came once and then he had the one with palm oil and salt, and I was like, oh my god, can I have this? Shall I not have this? Whereas now I might be like, I prefer one over the other, maybe for taste or maybe for other reasons, but also if I want a peanut butter and there's a different option available, then I would be like, okay, I'm just going to put that on my toast. It wouldn't be a problem, but to me, even having it
Yeah.
once at that point was going to be a problem. So it's like so then when, fast forward probably about a year from there, when I was at university, I went to university in Sheffield, so I had moved away from my parents at that point, which is probably a good thing. If I bought it, that wasn't the only one, but say something like that, then I would binge on it because it's like I didn't trust myself around it. I wanted to eat it. And so I think I generally was not eating quite enough at that point. But then I got specific binge foods, which I didn't really have before. Or if I didn't buy peanut butter, then I would eat some of my housemates' peanut butter and try and make it look like I didn't. Which I'm like, as removed from the situation now, I'm like, could you not have just had a conversation with those people and said, oh,
Yeah.
actually, is it all right if I just borrow some of your whatever? But it felt very secretive at the time. And I think the element of like shame came in with the
Yeah.
binge eating of like, I don't feel like I can control this. Was about so I was probably still binging and purging like once or twice a week, but in my head I was fine. I just didn't count that. I think because it wasn't taking over my whole life. I feel like when I was restricting, that got to the point that it felt like it was taking over my whole life. But when I was in this phase, when it seems better, but it wasn't actually totally better, there was still a lot going on. I could still function. I thought I could still
Yeah.
function very well, and I thought I've got a healthy relationship with food. I'm eating all these different foods. I can go out now. Then I decided to become a vegan. Which maybe we won't go into because I feel like that's a whole thing in itself, which had good intentions but also had some eating disorder impact or influence, kind of both ways. But then I feel like I've kind of put my identity on that then. Like we said, I had this healthy identity, but then I think by the time you've talked to other people who are vegan and, that became a thing in
Yeah.
itself, which can be positive, but I think for me it wasn't necessarily all positive. So I was kind of bubbling along. I got an award. I had a blog with my Instagram account as well, and I got an award for that, which was really nice. And there was like a health bloggers community, which was really nice. But I feel like within that, everyone was a bit like, oh, I don't think I did anything that was very specifically harmful. Like I wasn't writing in my recipes, I'm like, oh, how much shall I say here? Like, this food is terrible for you and it's going to cause all these diseases.
Mm-hmm.
It was more by implication, like, oh, this recipe is naturally like gluten free and this free and that free and doesn't have this, but it's naturally like that. It's not me saying you shouldn't.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So it
So you
wasn't,
weren't demonizing.
but also I kind of was, but it wasn't
Yeah.
as bad as it could be. I think because I
Yeah.
genuinely believe like people are looking for these recipes, so isn't it nice that I can create it? Can I take this one of them thing that like got lots of likes and lots of shares and things, apart from like smoothie bowls that looked pretty and the kind of Instagram let me do my porridge that looks nice situation, was like avocado brownie, so using like avocados instead of eggs and like coconut sugar and all the healthy buzz
Yeah.
ingredients. So there's nothing wrong with that in and of itself, but it's more what people build around that. Then are they scared to eat the other foods? I guess that's my
Yes.
take on it now. So I did that probably about a year. That was all right. Then I moved in by myself. Well, actually, no. What I was doing well in my PhD in the sense that I collected a lot of data quite early before other people, maybe because I was doing a questionnaire. So I was feeling really good about that. Linked back to what I was saying before about how I put my self-worth on like academia and getting good grades and that kind of thing. So it's like, okay, this is going well. Um, and then, unfortunately, then when I was analysing the data, I think I was on holiday, then my supervisor was on holiday, then we didn't meet up, and then we thought, oh, maybe we'll do this thing a bit differently. So I feel like there were 2 months of like more uncertainty around it, and I then got a lot of negative self-talk about like, oh, you're not doing good enough in this, and just feel like that undermined my self-esteem that I didn't realise at the time. And then I moved in by myself, and I feel like had I moved in by myself and everything was going well in my PhD, I wouldn't have. Basically, it got to the point that I was binging and purging a lot more. I will say this, but I also will say at the same time, it's not for people to compare themselves to. I think it's really easy to compare, oh, I was doing this behavior this many times and you were doing it that many times, but more so just to say that this was my experience and your experience might be very different. It got to me that I would only binge and purge in the evening, maybe once or twice a week when I was living with other people. Then it got to the point that I was doing that every day. Then it got to this was in the space of a few months as well when I moved in by myself. Then I was coming home at lunchtime from my I was in the office and I would come home at lunchtime, and then I would binge and purge at lunchtime. And then it got to like when I was woke up in the morning, the first thing that I was thinking about is like, have I got time to go and buy food to eat and throw up before I go to my lectures? So
What do
actually,
you think you were getting from the purging at that time?
I think it was just such like a really several things actually. I think it's something I was talking before about the endorphins and how to me it
Hmm.
started as a way to get rid of the food. But then actually at that point when I was like, I need to be sick, I need to go and buy food in order to enable me to do that. Because I'd probably eaten it the day before, or I hadn't wanted to keep certain things in the house because I thought, oh, that's a trigger. I'm going to end up doing it by accident. So first, it's very much about the food. I think it was that release. On one hand, I think it was like how it makes you feel when you do it. On the other hand, um, probably so this was happening like in my second year at university, the start of the second year until the Christmas was terms and how terms in the UK work. So then after Christmas, I did get an appointment with the NHS, and I only had a couple of appointments with them because they said something that I didn't like and I didn't go back, which like I say is not always a good strategy, but it was my strategy at the time. But they did really help me because I hadn't realized that when it kind of started getting worse and I was coming back from uni and binging and purging, and then not basically, and then I wouldn't go back in the afternoon because if anyone has been binging and purging or doing it, like for me, sometimes it would be multiple times in a row. Then it wouldn't be like, right, I've
Hmm.
done this behavior once, that's it now. I would carry on doing it several times. Um, I was so tired. I say like looking back, I feel like I felt like a zombie because of it. Um, oh, sorry, just something else that's come in my mind, like in the exercise side of things. I had got a lot more flexible with exercise too, so I think that's why I thought I was better as well. And because I'm thinking now about like, oh, when I felt like a zombie, I didn't realize, and I felt like when I was backtracking to when I was saying when I lived with my parents, when I came back from living abroad and I started binge eating, I feel like I didn't realize I had no energy then until I got loads of energy and things shifted. So I think I didn't really realize
Yeah.
like I was starting to feel like a zombie, like I just mean no energy, just foggy, just really difficult to like to do stuff. So I'm like, what was your question now? What was I guessing from? Oh yeah, the avoidance thing. If I would go home and do that and then I wouldn't go back to uni, so I wouldn't have to do the thing that was stressing me out. I was doing a meta-analysis. So for people that don't know, that's basically when I was trying to look for all the studies on a certain topic, which was what is the relationship between self-control and eating. However, that is a very big topic and a lot of meta-analysis. By the time you would get the studies and get the data out so you could run an analysis on that data, you probably usually have about 10 or maybe 20 studies. I had like 100 studies in mine to do that with. And I just got so stressed because you have your criteria that you want to classify it against. And then you have the study and you're like, does this fit or does this not fit? Shall I include it or not? And I was so worried that a reviewer was going to absolutely like slate me and say I'd done
And,
everything wrong, that it was stopping me from doing it. And so I was
and
trying to avoid that.
you already mentioned that being good at academics was also part of your identity. So I guess that felt really stressful.
It was really
So
stressful.
the purging was an avoidance to that as well.
Yeah, I think that's how I've come to understand it. And I suppose to fast forward a little bit, when I had that understanding, because part of my PhD was about habits, so I understood about, how do you make a habit? Actually, there's differences, for example, in like habits that a habit for starting something, but a habit also when, a habitual thing that you just do the whole thing without thinking then. So I guess I understood more than most people would about
Mm-hmm.
that. So actually, once I got that light bulb of like, oh, the reward for this behavior, what is it doing for me? Well, in the beginning, what I thought it was doing was getting rid of the food, whereas now what it's doing for me has all these other layers as
Yeah.
well. How it's making me feel in a positive sense, because I did like making myself throw up at that point. Like now I think about it. Well, before I did it, like when I was growing up, I hated being sick. Also, I was on a podcast once. I kept saying being sick, and the person was in America, and they were like, "Do you mean throwing up?" I'm like, "I mean throwing up." We would say being. I think we're a bit polite in England, aren't we? We're like, "I'm being sick." I hated it. Like even thinking about it was like awful. And then I got to the point that I liked doing it. It was like had a positive association in my head.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas now, if I think about it, I'm like, oh gosh, no, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to be ill. It would just make me feel awful, like the taste, the
Yeah.
smell, like everything about it. Whereas it actually, in my head, all the associations with it had changed at that point. And just to say, like, my dad did come and visit me once when I was living by myself in a flat. Um, and he did make some comments to me like, are you making yourself sick? Because I think he wasn't sure if I was doing it when I lived at home with him, but in the middle of the night, I guess, when no one else was up, and obviously trying to clean up and things afterwards. He did approach me about it, and I was doing it, but there was like absolutely no way that I was admitting it to him or going to talk to him about it or to anyone, because it's like at that point I didn't want to stop.
Mm.
And so I think the point when I realized I want to stop was when I realized actually this is having a massive impact on my teeth, having an impact on like I sat down and I made a spreadsheet of how much money I was spending, because for a PhD, mine was a funded PhD, which I'm very fortunate for that, but the amount of money that you get for it is not a great amount. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like, oh gosh, okay, I'm using my savings now. So I sat down and made a spreadsheet and looked at the amount of money that I was spending on food. That literally was me binging and purging with that food, not even just day to day. I lived near a Waitrose, which wasn't particularly helpful on that front. So I think in my head then I just the negative started to become bigger than actually what is this thing giving me anymore. I wasn't so worried about like, if you Google it and then it will say like about potassium and how it could be detrimental for your cardiovascular health and your heart, and actually you could die from it. Like that didn't seem relevant to me at the time.
I suppose that's invisible, isn't it? You
Mm.
can't see or feel that's happening, but you can see your money going down and you can see your teeth starting to become weaker and the enamel and staining and stuff like that. When stuff is more visible to us, it makes it a lot more real, doesn't it?
I think as well it almost feels like that's not going to happen to me.
Yes.
Like, yes, that does happen to people, but it's a small percentage of people, and they're unlucky. Not actually, that could happen to you. It could happen to anyone doing that, but you just think, well, it's not going to happen to me. So like both of those things, I think, like you were saying, this feels very real and my experience right now, that I can see this is happening, and don't want that to be happening anymore. I think as well, like there are a couple of things almost that were like the straw that broke the camel's back, even though it's a few. One was when I went on holiday. So actually, I did get back with my boyfriend. He's now my husband, and we have two children. Because we'd booked a holiday together, and I think it was like £1,000 each. And we were both like, I don't want to lose the money, so shall we just see what happens? So we went on the holiday. I mean, it wasn't a great holiday because there was obviously a lot of tension, and things, but we did decide to get back together. And I think a lot had changed for me at that point. Like I was saying, I did have a lot more freedom. It wasn't okay at that point, but that was a couple of months after we, maybe like 4, if that's a couple, after we split up. So he has been with me throughout this. But yeah, we went on holiday with him at the start of my second year of my PhD. And I just spent the whole time thinking, like, when can I binge and purge? I don't want to do it when he's in the hotel room, because he is literally like, the toilet's in the hotel room, isn't it? I was going to do it in the toilet. I know other people's experience of it is that they would do it other places. I think as well, to me, it was like, felt like this is getting more extreme because I was doing it in more public places, for example, whereas I didn't when I started off. And so it just felt like boundaries of this are getting bigger and bigger now.
Yeah.
That it's starting to worry me that these things are happening, and I don't feel like I cannot do it. So I think I just was really cross that I could have had a nice holiday, but I spent the whole time thinking about binging and purging. At that point, I did really want to try and stop. Like, I remember he was going cycling one day, so I built up in my head about cycling this day. He's going cycling, and I feel like I've been careful about what I was eating before, so I wouldn't feel triggered to binge and purge. Because I mean, it still was a bit about the food at that point,
Yeah.
like eat this food, not that food, but not as much as it was prior to. I went to the supermarket and I put all this food in my basket, and I just like absolutely knew I didn't want to binge and purge as well. And so I just remember putting it all back on the shelves and like leaving the supermarket, like really feeling very emotional. So I didn't do it that day. I just like, tried to distract myself and stuff. But then I ended up doing it the next day when we were out, and I ate something I didn't want. And then I ended up going to the bathroom, like of the restaurant. And oh, sorry, I actually know we've been here ages. So it's like I just got really cross that was happening, and it didn't feel like my choice that it was happening, if that makes sense. And then I feel like that Christmas was awful because I just spent basically the whole time with me thinking, when can I be alone, or like do this behavior and other people won't realize that I'm doing it. And I just, I don't want this anymore. Like, I don't want
I
that.
guess it stopped you being present and enjoying the things that you were doing, because you were constantly calculating, when can I go and binge and purge?
Yeah. And I think when it wasn't happening so often, when I lived with people in my first year, it was more a reaction. It was still, at that point, there was a reaction to what I've eaten. So I probably was having more general thoughts about food and things, or exercise, but the purging was a reaction to what I'd eaten, whereas it got to the point that it wasn't a reaction to what I'd eaten anymore. Like, that was the goal. And so then, like I said, that's, like you're saying, it was taking over my life. I couldn't be present in other things. So I think that's a point that I was like, right, I really just can't do this anymore.
So how did you stop?
How did I stop? So I feel like this is linked into life purpose again. So that Christmas, this is also a little bit TMI. Maybe I won't say that. It's probably a bit TMI. But I did do you know when Facebook just knows stuff about you? So
Yes.
I'd had this advert come up for like a business coaching thing. I think it's, oh no, I think I know what it was, because I was a bit like, oh, I knew I basically, I wanted to quit my PhD most of the time, but I didn't, because I didn't have anything else, to go and do. And also I felt a bit guilty that I'd been funded and other people hadn't, and so I should probably finish it. So I was looking about like if I could set up a business making energy balls, because that
Okay,
felt like a
yeah.
nice thing for me, and I felt quite passionate about that. Or like, I was making some money from my blog actually. Can I do that full time instead of my PhD? So I think probably Google had seen me searching for these things, and then people do Google Analytics and things, don't they? So they know which Facebook ads to give you. So I got this ad for a business coaching thing. So I was on her webinar, and she was talking about how to set up your own business, because also at the same time I think I realized I want to be a psychologist that works with people rather than is in an office doing this thing that you don't have people to talk to you about that in detail. And again, I think I felt quite isolated at that point when I was living by myself. I was doing this topic that other people don't know this much about. So I think that was a factor then as well. So I watched this webinar, then I had a call with her, and then she convinced me to sign up with her like a business coach. So then she was helping me like set up a website, and at that point I was doing more of the like behavior change, or like you might call it environmental engineering, the kind of stuff about like, oh, don't leave your chocolates on the side because then you might be tempted to eat them, put them in the cupboard, like So I was kind of doing more that kind of stuff, though I didn't really have any clients because I just started out, but that's more what I was pitching. Let me help you be healthy in this way, but also this narrow definition of health. I don't
Yeah.
think it was outside my remit because I'd got a master's degree in that area. I was kind of doing a PhD in it. So I kind of started off on that. So I was quite determined that I felt, and I know it's not true for everyone, but I felt for me, if I would want to help people with their relationship with food, that I feel like I need to change this for myself. I know I want to stop binging and purging, but this is like another motivation for me to stop. If I want to help, maybe I do want to be a psychologist who helps people with recovery. And also just to say, there had been points like before the Christmas, before I decided to go to NHS, when I had been looking for support, like private support, myself, and I just because it's coming off my head now, I just felt so broken. I just was looking at the things and looking at the testimonials and thinking, this is not going to work for me, because why would it? Like, this is so terrible that nothing is going to work. There's something wrong with me. So I don't know if other people are feeling like that, but I just also wanted to voice, that's how I was feeling. But then it got to the point that I was like, I don't know if I can swear, I'm effing sick of this, that I
Absolutely.
absolutely got to stop. So yeah, I think that was a big motivation for me. And so I did actually stop for like a couple of weeks, kind of through willpower, but also through understanding it as a habit and understanding the reward. So if we think about a habit, there's a trigger, the behavior, or thoughts, and then the reward. So I kind of was breaking it down, like, let me give myself a different reward. So for me, it was that I would still come home at lunchtime, but then I would read a book. There was like a psychology book, but not a textbook, more like a layperson's book. But it meant I
Mhm.
don't have to go back straight away. I can still give myself some extra time at home, and then I will read that for a bit, and then maybe I won't go back if I don't want to. I mean, I'd already written the afternoon off anyway if I was going to make myself sick. So, and
Yeah.
yeah, okay, arguably I should be doing more, but I'm going to cut myself some slack if this is what I need. So I think it was a privileged position in that I had the time,
It also
that I was
sounds
able
like
to
you
do that.
started bringing in some self-compassion there then. If this is what I need,
Yeah, maybe.
I give myself permission to do that.
Maybe in a, yeah, maybe not an intentional way, but I think I was thinking, okay, well, this is the best. I mean, had to do a lot of work around like rest is productive, and reframing
Mhm.
what I was thinking about that. So I think that was one level. Um, I think I did, like I was describing about when I was on holiday and I put the food back on the shelf. I think I did have to do a lot of kind of behaviors like that. I think what really helped me as well, I listened to a hypnotherapy recording that was actually for stopping smoking, but every time they were saying smoking, I was saying binging. Because I think at that point as
Um,
well, I did think, oh, it's the binging that's an issue. I think it's only after that I've realised at that point the purging was an issue. Um,
mhm.
so, but they just said something that like just clicked so much and like took the power away from food for me. It was like, often smokers, before you've even had the cigarette, you already start to feel better thinking that you can go outside and smoke. And I was like, oh my, yes. When I walked to the shop thinking I'm going to binge and purge, I already feel better and I've not even done it. So that
Yeah.
was just such an eye opener for me of like, oh, actually, I thought it was the food and those things that I needed, but maybe it's not. That, I think, is what you were saying before. Like, what was that doing for you, that behavior? I think I had
Yes.
that understanding of actually this has other roles, which was really helpful for me. So there was that. So I kind of maybe white knuckled it a little bit. I was trying these other strategies, but it was also a lot of like, right, just put that food back or just don't do that. A lot of crying, a lot of trying different things. What was I going to say? Oh yeah, and then so I think then it was more that we were saying about, sometimes when I would wake up in the night and binge and purge, it was stress. I think I noticed a lot more, right, these urges are related to events. Like it was a presentation about how to give presentations, and the guy just really, really annoyed me so much. And well, there's several things that this, it's so tricky, isn't it? Because there's so many layers going on. So one thing is, I thought I'm trying to recover. Um, I'll tell one story and then I'll tell the sub aspects of it afterwards because maybe that will make more sense. I was so annoyed, and I remember coming out of it and thinking, like, I don't know how to deal with these emotions. I don't know how to deal with this without making myself sick. And so I
Mhm.
kind of walked around for a bit and tried to delay it. And then I was like, well, I'll go to the shop and like I'll buy myself something that feels like a nice treat food and stuff. So I was trying different strategies not to do it, but then I ended up, I ended up binging and purging. So that happened for a few days before I feel like I got on top of it and stopped it again. The other layer is like I was doing a juice cleanse. Like so it's still going on in the background. I was still like, oh, but I still need to find this perfect diet. I'm doing all these other stuff, but maybe this diet, this juice cleanse will help me reset. So I was probably just really hungry as well, which is why I couldn't deal
Yeah.
with this person annoying me. So I think it is tricky that there's all these factors in the mix. Like in my head, I can conveniently forget that I was doing the juice cleanse until I think about being in that presentation and just drinking my juice. Like,
Yeah. It's interesting how hunger affects how we feel emotionally, um, how we can concentrate. It affects so much our moods. We don't realize it. So, yeah, you may well have been irritated because you were hungry or hangry. Hey.
yeah. So I think I was doing a lot of different things at the same time to try and recover. I didn't have professional support at that point, but I was able to apply what I knew about psychology to myself, which I hadn't really been able to do that before. And I think as well, I think it's tricky sometimes with behaviors like restriction compared to like, I can be like, right, stop binging and purging. Well, it's quite obvious to know if you stop making yourself sick.
Yes.
So it felt easier in some ways to be like, right, stop that behavior than I'm going to stop restricting and eat more variety of foods. Does that make sense? So it was more a clear
Yeah.
goal for me. So I'd had a phase, and we'll try and wrap it up now. I had a phase that I do tend to forget sometimes as well, of like I would binge, but I wouldn't purge. So I was living with my boyfriend at that point. I had a year living by myself, and then I moved in with my boyfriend, and he would go to work during the day, and so I would be at home to try and do my meta-analysis, which my supervisor, bless them, were like, just do one paper a day, just get the data from one paper, and it was still like just felt like too much.
Mhm.
But so they were trying to help me. I did do it in the end, but I never published it because I couldn't bring myself to. But I would go to the shop and buy like my binge food because I felt like I had to do that some days. But I was like, right, I'm just going to sit on the TV. I watched like 7 seasons of Gossip Girl or 6 seasons of Gossip Girl because I was like, right, just sit here, just don't go and purge, because to me that was the thing that was keeping it going more
Yeah.
than the binging. And so I would just, I don't know if it was every day, but it was probably for a few months that I didn't do a whole lot other than try and stop binging and purging.
What would you like people to hear that are in the position where they recognize that they want to stop, but they just don't know how?
Good point. I know you're like, wrap this up now, quick. What would I like them to hear? I think I would like them to hear that there are different options. And I guess from my professional experience as well, things happen differently for different people. So for me, it very much felt like, right, I need to stop the purging in order to stop binging, and obviously work on the other aspects that you were saying, self-compassion. But for other people, I think it's working out, oh, actually, no, for me, I only purge because I binged. And so I would look to start there. So I think it's maybe the empowerment. And I know you have lots of specific question episodes in your podcast as well, don't you? That's quite clear from the titles. I think it's about working out, okay, where is it to start for me? Because I think when I've been talking, I've been like, oh, there's all these factors involved in this situation, all these factors
Yeah.
involved in that situation. I think it's sometimes having, that maybe some people do it through journaling or something else, but like, how can you start to work out for yourself, okay, where do I think is the best place to start in all of this? Because I think it can be overwhelming. And I've even done Instagram posts about like, just pick one thing and go
Yeah.
with that, because I think there can be so
So
much.
get really curious to start then. Start noticing the behaviors, what's triggering it. Have I nourished enough during the day before I feel the need to binge at night? Is it the purging that's driving it? So starting to get really, really curious about what's going on for you.
I think
Because the
so.
first stage of any healing is awareness, right?
Yeah, because when you're saying about the getting curious as well, I think that when you said about the self-compassion is a big shift, because I think often, like I was saying,
Huge.
I had that stage where like, what's wrong with me? Why am I feeling so broken? I like felt very hopeless at that point because I didn't think anything was going to work. Whereas when, like you say, you start, okay, actually, what is going on here?
Yeah.
Maybe, and also I think different things appeal to different people, maybe how they process information. Some people are like, right, let me look at this like a habit, that makes sense to me, how it might be, you know, a habit cycle, so let me look at what I could do about the triggers then. Whereas some people that doesn't appeal, maybe if they're more into feelings or something, they might try a different approach. So I think as well, just other people who are listening to this podcast, I think sometimes finding someone that you feel like you can relate to, or you enjoy listening to that person, because there are so many voices out there. Whereas I think, right, just pick one or a couple of people and just be like, right, okay, what are these saying? How does that feel to me? How does that relate
Yeah.
to me? And obviously get professional support if you feel like you need to, but also like we could have a whole hour-long podcast about that and the difficulties and issues that people benefits that people might have with
So if
that.
somebody listening to this episode has resonated with you and would like to work with you, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I've got usually active on Instagram pretty much every day, or you can, that's rachel.evans.phd, or my website, eatingdisordertherapist.co.uk. It's got a contact form, and it's got a form to book a free call with me as well. And yeah, just to say, everyone, this is so long, thank you for all your patience. And I hope it's been helpful, even though we didn't actually go specifically to the topic that we thought we would in the beginning.
It happened as it was meant to happen. And somebody listening will be getting light bulb moments from this episode. So
I feel it's like, as soon as someone's talk about yourself, I'm like, oh, let me talk about this for ages. Whereas when people are like, just tell me what are the symptoms of bulimia, then I'm like, oh, wait, okay, professional mind. But hopefully, yeah, it was what someone needed.
yeah, definitely. So I'll put all the links in the show notes.
Yeah.
And thank you for sharing. It's been a really interesting episode. And as I said, I'm sure the fact that you've highlighted there are so many layers, it helps take away some of the shame and blame that people feel. So thank you so much for being a wonderful guest, Rachel.
Thank you. And just to say that Julia is coming on my podcast at some point in the near future. So watch out for that as well.
Brilliant. Thank you. And thank you everyone for listening. And I'll see you all next week.